But it's very hard to market like that. It's very hard to sell like that. And even in big companies, and I've worked in some very large companies like Google and IBM. Even at those companies, they are not attempting to sell everything to everyone. And so in this case, the company is going to have to decide to position for where the customer is at right now. Because if the customer, we don't have to position against anything that doesn't show up in a customer shortlist.
特定の顧客が大いに関心を持つ事柄において、自分がいかに最良であるかを定義づけるポジショニング。その構築に必要な10のステップを書いた本で大ヒット。ポジショニングと市場戦略の専門家、エイプリル・ダンフォードさんにインタビュー。Google など大手企業100社以上にアドバイスをしてきた彼女が語るポジショニングに潜む落とし穴とは。
久彩子の世界のすごい人 Amazing people of the world.
So now, April, is there one that you can share us, like your biggest positioning failure? I don't know if you have one or what you.
Well, I'm gonna give you one. I joined a company. They had really, really amazing technology, and part of the reason I joined as the vice president of marketing was because the technology was so interesting. It was so differentiated. Nobody had any technology that looked anything, and what this technology did, it was kind of a data analytics thing. But what it did is if you had an absolute mountain of data, it could do an analysis on an absolute mountain of data. Like the big customer that they had at the time when I joined was a bank. And this bank had queries, like this analysis that they had to do. And it took them so long to do it, they could only run it on a Friday because it took them until Monday morning to get the result back. And we sold them our thing, and they could get that result back in 3 minutes versus 2.5 days. So this sounds like magic technology, I thought. We're going to be able to sell a ton of this. So we went through the positioning process. We knew who we were competing with. So we were competing with, other folks that did this kind of stuff. That was easy. We knew what made us different. We had this patented algorithm that no one else had, and it was amazing. We knew what the value was. Okay. The value was that it could do this certain kind of analysis really, really, really fast. And then we got to the next step, which was, well, who cares a lot about that? Like, what kind of businesses should we be targeting? And the original thesis on that was, well, anybody that had a really, really large amount of data would have to do an analysis like this once in a while. And they would certainly want to do it in 3 minutes versus 3 days. But our assumption, it turned out, was wrong. So we went in to sell it. And we said, hey, we have this thing, and it does this query in 3 minutes. And they said, do you do a query like that? And they said, yeah, we do it. Every couple of weeks, we do a query like that. And they said, do you run it on Friday? So that, yeah, it takes us 2 days. We run it on Friday. We get the answer on Monday. And we said, wouldn't you like to do it in 3 minutes? And they said, not really. It's okay. We don't really need the answer. It's not that urgent. We just assumed that faster was always better. But it turned out, if they didn't really need the answer right away, then it was okay if it took 2 days to run it. So we started pitching it to different kinds of customers, and it turned out the only customers that cared a lot were customers that needed to do this analysis because one of their customers was calling on the support line and they needed to answer a question. And it turned out the only companies at the time that had that kind of data and needed to do that kind of analysis were ad tech companies, and there were 10 of those on the planet. So this is the positioning disaster scenario.
Yeah, you've learned a lot from that.
顧客の想定を間違えてしまったことにより起きたポジショニングの悲劇。こうしたケースは珍しいことではないという。
So April, you have experiences in both like massive enterprises and startups. So is there like a common pitfall? Like no matter how amazing the product is, it's like suddenly fails to resonate with customers?
Yeah. I mean, there's a handful of things. The first one is this idea that we think we can only be one thing. So, we're a database, we're database people. This has to be a database. What else could it be? You get this at big companies and small companies where it's really hard for the company to step back and say, well, I don't know, maybe it's a data warehouse. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's an analytics tool. Maybe it's a business intelligence tool. There are a lot of things it could be here, folks. This idea that getting stuck in an idea of this is what the product is because this is what it's always been. This is common across big companies and small companies. Big companies tend to have, they'll have positioning challenges because they've done acquisitions. So they've gone and acquired a small company, and now that small company needs to fit into the positioning of this bigger thing that they've done. On the startup side, a startup that gets acquired will often have to be very sensitive to the idea that, okay, now we're part of this bigger thing. So we can't just position ourselves the way we always did when we were not part of this bigger thing. So this idea, if there's an acquisition on both sides, everybody's going to have to change their idea about what is this thing? Why should anybody care about it? And then the other thing is just, often I think companies are not checking in on their positioning enough, whether you're a big company or a small company. But there's this idea like the positioning works, we can just kind of set it and forget it. And this is never true. And we're seeing this right now, in particular with AI, in that a lot of companies that have been very successful for a very long period of time are now struggling to try to figure out what is our AI story? What do we say when a customer comes and says, how does this fit into my AI strategy? Are you guys still going to be around in 5 years? Because it seems like everything's going to be different. There are companies out there now struggling with that 5 years ago, nobody was asking them that question. Nobody was worried about that.
With AI just rapidly changing the world, how do you deal with it? And, how do you see the future of your framework positioning?
Yeah, so I don't think AI as a technology changes the fundamentals of positioning, but I do think that it makes positioning harder for companies in a handful of ways. So one is the competitive landscape is shifting really quickly, and companies are either too slow or too fast to shift.
Too fast? That's interesting.
So for example, they never had much competition, and now all of a sudden they have these little AI native companies are showing up in their business, and they think they can get away with the same positioning they always had. But now they've got these AI companies that are winning deals in their market. They're going to have a response. Why pick us versus this new hot AI stuff? There's one set of companies that fall into that category. The other set of companies are the team internally is so fascinated with AI and using the AI tools themselves, reading all the analyst reports and reading all the stuff that everybody's writing about AI, but their customers aren't there at all.
True, they're not there yet.
Some of these companies will come to me and they'll say, well, OpenAI is our competitor. Anthropic is our competitor. There's these vibe coding tools. They're our competitor. But when you talk to sales will say, that never comes up. Our customers just aren't there yet. And so in this case, the company is going to have to decide, they need to position for where the customer is at right now. So right now, if the customer doesn't consider an AI tool competition, then you don't have to position against it. It's a ghost. But we don't want to shift our positioning before the customer is ready for it. Because if the customer, we don't have to position against anything that doesn't show up in a customer shortlist. So if a customer doesn't consider them competition, we don't have to consider them competition for now.
需要のない商品をアピールしても、それは幽霊に物を売っているのと同じ。製品の質はもちろん、ポジショニングとして顧客への目線は見失ってはいけないのです。
So April, have you ever worked with a Japanese company?
I have not.
You have not?
I've not.
Ooh.
I don't speak Japanese. And so this is the obvious thing holding me back. Now, I've had conversations with Japanese companies.
Ooh, what's your impression on them?
Well, I spent a lot of time in Japan when I was working at
Really?
a handful of bigger companies. Yeah. I worked at a big database company a long time ago in the early stage of my career called Sybase. And we had a database, an embedded database for mobile devices, and did a lot of work in Japan.
Ooh.
And so I was in Japan quite a bit doing press stuff there because we were training the sales reps in Japan and teaching people how to sell.
Any
this
good
thing.
or bad memories you have?
Oh, great memories. I remember the hotels were fantastic. The food was fantastic.
And really, it still is.
My main memory of Japan is that it was easy to do business there, with the exception of the language. So we generally had somebody doing translation for us. But other than that, it was easy to do business. Like things were orderly. Things ran on time. Things were organized. It's not like this in every country you go to.
Oh, so it made it easy for you.
Yeah.
In Japan, like really traditional old companies, like their executives often say, everyone is a potential customer, or the broader the target, the better, What is the ultimate sign to find the best customers who truly love your product?
Yeah. This is typical in big companies where they'll try to sell everybody. It's funny. I see it in small companies too, though.
Really?
Like small companies will come to me and they'll say, "But we can sell anyone. The thing is great. Everyone should have one."
Yeah.
But it's very hard to market like that. It's very hard to sell like that. And even in big companies, and I've worked with some very large companies like Google and IBM. Even at those companies, they are not attempting to sell everything to everyone. So the key thing really is to come back to this idea of value.
Value.
Like, what is the value that we deliver, and who's going to care a lot about that? So I'm thinking about a particular product I worked on with Google, where one of the things they could do was manage any kind of data at an incredible scale. But when you looked at that, not every company needed that, because not every company is storing an incredible amount of data. So they would never try to sell that to a mid-market company or a company that didn't have incredible scale in the data. And so they were looking at mainly not just big companies, but companies that stored a lot of data. So then you would look at, well, who are these companies that are storing a lot of data? A lot of times it would be companies that sold retail and had many, many, many customers, like millions of customers. And there would be data records for every single customer. So they would be selling to these big, big retail brands, or big, big brands that had lots and lots of customers. And so they would get very narrowly focused on that, because they could serve that kind of a customer better than everyone else. In particular, big companies, if we're selling with salespeople and we're paying for marketing, the more we can narrow down who's a really good fit customer, the more efficient we can be at marketing and selling to those customers, because then we can really, really focus in on just the people that are very good fit for us. So we can analyze our marketing tactics and say, okay, well, who are these companies? Where do they hang out? What do they read? What do they consume? And we're going to try to place marketing there, as opposed to just, putting up a billboard on the highway that everybody sees.
Yeah.
いいものなら万人に売れるという職人かたぎの考え方はビジネスの世界では NG。 ターゲットを意識することでこそ売りたい商品は輝くのです。
Can I ask you about your childhood days? Because I think when you were little, there were no AIs, right? So did you always want to get involved in tech, or what was your dream when you wanted?
Yeah, I was pretty interested in tech
You were?
at an early age. So I was, I was a pretty good programmer in high school.
In high school?
Yeah, in high school. And I did programming on terrible languages back then, like people don't remember assembly language, but assembly language was literally zeros and ones.
What do you mean assembly languages? Like,
it's like the programming language that I learned back then was very, very rudimentary compared to what you would do. But interestingly, I grew up in a small town, and I originally thought I would go to med school and be a doctor.
Med school? Ooh.
Yeah, and because I was in a small town and I didn't know anybody that worked in tech. So I didn't know what it was like to work at a tech company. So I liked tech and I did programming, but I didn't understand what that was like as a career. Ooh. So when I went to university, I did pre-med.
Pre-med?
And then, so then after 2 years, I got accepted into medical school. And I had a change of heart. I was like, you know what? I should be doing tech. I don't know why I'm not doing tech. I don't know why I didn't think. Because by then I was at a university and I knew lots of people studying tech. And so I switched into systems design engineering.
Was there like a particular incident during your school days that made you want to go to tech when you were in med school?
Well, no. So I just chickened out. Like, I was like, I don't think I've been on this path to do the doctor thing without really thinking about, is this what I actually want to do? Like,
right. Good
and
choice.
So I switched.
Good choice.
So after a couple of years, I switched. And then when I came out of engineering, I landed a job with a startup, and that was very unusual back then. Like, when I graduated was the 90s, and it was very different. Tech was very different back then. So we didn't have venture capital in the way that we have venture capital now. So most companies that were tech companies were actually quite small, and we didn't even call them startups. We called them small businesses.
Uh-oh. Look how huge it is now.
And so I worked for a company that was in the same town where I went to university. And that company, I worked on a database for that company. We ended up getting acquired shortly after. Like, I think I was there for a year before the company got acquired. And through the acquisition, I ended up running a marketing team. And at that point, I never really thought about marketing as a career. I'd studied engineering, so I didn't think I was going to end up in the marketing department. But at that point, we were marketing a very technical thing to very technical buyers, and it wasn't unusual for people in marketing and sales to have a technical background. And so I started running this team in marketing, and then I thought, you know what, this is kind of my thing. And that's how I ended up in marketing after, medicine, and then system design engineering, and then marketing. It was a bit of a weird path, but here we are.
Wow. So you did great positioning in your life too.
I guess so. Yeah, I don't know.
So do you have any message to our viewers in Japan?
So here's the advice that I would give to folks listening from Japan. The process is there for you to follow so that you can do positioning in a way that isn't just, but at the same time, the process is high level enough that you don't have to follow it perfectly. You can use it as a starting point and then skip the parts that don't seem relative to you, or double down on pieces where you think you need to double down. It's just having any process is so much better than having no process at all, that you're going to get value out of it no matter what you do. And then, I guess my big message for the folks in Japan that are listening to this is, like, I hope that my stuff is helpful. Like, when I wrote the book and I was figuring out the methodology, I kept thinking, man, this shouldn't be this hard. It shouldn't be this hard. It shouldn't be that every time we're trying to position a product, we're starting from nothing and we're starting from scratch. So the thing that's made me feel really good in putting the book out is the book has sold a lot of copies in English, and I get emails every day about people telling me, like, it was super helpful in the work that they're trying to do. So I'm hoping that folks in Japan find it helpful as well.
Have a nice day. Thank you.
Okay, you too.
本当にすごい実績を持った方なので、ほら女性だったじゃない、もうちょっとなんかこうすごいこう上から来る先生、大先生みたいな方なのかなと思ったら、割となんか私途中から女子トークしてるみたいな気持ちになっちゃって、割とフラットな方でキャラキャラ笑いながらすごいことをさらっと言ったりするところがすごくいいなと思いましたね。
なんか印象に残った話とか、こう
印象に
キーワードみたいなのって何かありましたか？
でもなんか最後のメッセージにも似たようなことを言ってたんだけれども、この10個のステップ、これはとっても大事だけど、一旦これはもう本当にベースだから体とか細胞に刻み込んどいたら、あとは勇気を持って自分にちょっとこのステップは合わないなとか、そういうのはどんどん排除していっていいっていうようなことを言ってくれて、なんとなくこれをやりなさいっていうよりは、これをあなたのオリジナルバージョンにしていいんだよみたいなところがやっぱりすごくこう臨機応変な人だし、特に今ね担当してるのがやっぱりテクノロジーの市場なので、なんだろう、いい意味でこうその都度その都度こう転換する方針とかを、そこのスピード感がやっぱりすごく今っぽいなと思いました。
ちなみに北さんはこう独立する時とかってこうなんかポジショニングを考えたりとかってあんまりしない？
これも強制で夫の転勤ですね。
あ、そうなんですね。
夫の海外転勤で行ったみたいなところもあるので、
なるほど。
だから私は割と go with the flow っていうか、なんかそのなんかなんかもう流れに身を任せつつみたいな、その流れの中ではちょっとこう頑張りますけど、大きな流れはなんかちょっとしょうがなく舞い降りるみたいな。方向転換って言えば方向転換ですね。ね、エイプリルさんが言ってた。
そうですね。実際にこうフィットする、適合するみたいな感じですかね。
そうだってそこでじゃあ夫は海外行きます、じゃあ単身赴任どうぞとか、じゃあちょっと私キャリア取りたいんで離婚しましょうとか、そんな選択肢もあったわけだけど、なんかその時あんまりそれが現実味はなく、きっとちょっとずつポジショニングをしていたのかもしれない。だからそうやって振り返るのも面白いですね、今日のお話を聞いて。
そうですね。もともとはエイプリルさんも医者だったっていうね。マジかって
びっくりしたよね。
医学免許合格してましたって言ってたんで。
で勉強してて、これじゃないなって言ってふって、普通ね日本で医学部入ったらとりあえず一旦医者になりますよね。でもなんか10年後もしかしたらほらなんか AI かける医療みたいな感じでやってるかもね。
確かにテック企業ですごいポジショニングされてるので、そういう方向に進むっていうのもありそうな感じですね。
ワクワクする話がたくさんあったね。
いやそうですね。
だからさ、私たちの番組もさ、ペンギン編集長、ちょっとポジショニングしようよ。
そうですね。この番組の価値は何だっていうね、かなり難しい問いですが、
そうね。
どうですか、キサさんどうですか？何だと思います？
目指せスルメイカ。
どういうことですか？ちょっとどういうポジションですか？
見れば見るほどじわーっと突き刺さる。会社勤めしてる人とかそういうビジネスに関わってるマーケティングの人とかにも見てほしいんですけど、もしかしたらお家でね、主婦やってる人とかも見てるうちに、自分にも当てはまる、自分の日常でもそういう視点を持って過ごすと、ちょっと生活良くなったとか、笑顔が増えたとか、なんかいい空気が家庭で回り始めたみたいな、そういうエッセンスもちょっとは入ってるので、なんかそういうのに気づいてじわじわ見れば見るほどちょっとずつ幸せになるっていう番組を目指しません？編集長。
なるほど。頑張っていきたいところですね。
最後まで見てくださってありがとうございます。
チャンネル登録、いいねよろしくお願いします。
はい、ピー